Yes, and there we are again with a new episode of Dancegems. And today we are going to talk about 10 body parts and why we like to talk about just 10 body parts. Now, of course, we have way more body parts than 10, but from the GEM method perspective, we talk about 10 body parts. And the man who actually came up with that concept is, of course, Greten, my buddy and colleague and my friend. Let's see what he has to say about the 10 body parts. Ton, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, Sean. Hi, Sean. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the Dancegems podcast. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought this should actually, or maybe should have been the first episode about gems. 10 body parts. Why 10? I pretend now that I don't know the answer, but when I first met you, I immediately said, Tom, we have way more body parts than 10. And
Yes,
then you start to
absolutely
explain, and
correct,
I
Sean.
thought, oh my, that is actually interesting. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. We have more than 10 body parts. But for dancing, I use 10 mainly. But if you more advance in the GEM method, of course, there will be more details in it. Of, of course. Yes, that's so strange because when I give somewhere a lecture, Sean,
yeah,
the first thing what people say, there are more than 10 body parts. But if you believe there are only 10, I didn't say that, but then it's 10. Okay. And it happened several times already. So now we have 10 body parts, but of course we have more
yes.
that I'm already in front before them because I know this answer will come. Yeah, we have more than 10. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I sometimes even make a joke nowadays, but depends a little bit on the group. I said, yeah, we have 10 body parts, but how come that we spend hours to talk only about your feet? You pretend that there's only one body part.
Yes, it's in the
Uh,
ballroom Latin
it's in the
world.
ballroom. It's in our world.
Yeah, in the
Is that
ballroom Latin world, they speak only about feet and legs,
legs at
sometimes
best?
about arms.
So make a little
But
bit
then,
of a joke with it. But now, in all
yeah,
seriousness, when I met you of course, I met you way before, but when we talked for the first time about GEM and you started to explain me your method and you started with the 10 body parts, I had exactly the same reaction. But this is probably why we started to work together. I wanted to know why you came to that idea. I was not rejecting it. I was, tell me more. And because I felt 10 is actually, oh, I think I can remember 10. That's what immediately had my mind. And then you started to explain what the 10 body
yes,
parts are.
yes, mainly how I came to 10, because 10, I assume that's an easy figure, 10, to remember.
Yeah, easy number to remember. Yeah.
Yeah, 10. But of course, 10 will not say it's easy. That is also simple. It could be also quite complicated how you use them. I thought afterwards, which are the main body parts? The main one. It's the head.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. The head, I have the joint there in my neck. Of course, it's connected with my neck and my shoulders. Yes, and then the head. So that would be the first one. The second one would be the shoulders.
Yeah.
And the shoulders, if you move them, but try to move your neck without your head and try to move the neck without the shoulders. That's actually wouldn't be possible. So it's connected with each other. So this is why I came to a head, then shoulders two. Then we came to Sean. We can continue. You can take it over. The
Yeah.
arms.
So then we mentioned arms, right? Of course, we have two arms, but for the method, just to think about it like this, we're trying to give you insight in the modality of 10 body parts, how you can use it in movement and how to use it and why to use it for. We talk about that. But the third one would be the arms. So, of course, your hands
Yes.
are connected on the arms, but I'm not moving my hands now. They move in space, and I'm also
Yeah.
not moving my shoulders. Try not.
Yes.
Yeah. Try not.
Yeah, yeah.
So if
But they are connected with
they
each
are
other.
connected, so there is movement in there, but it's not obvious that I now move my shoulders. Now, of course, my arms are connected, but in principle, I keep my arms still, but I move my shoulders, which is different. If you could see it on Spotify or on YouTube, that I now move arms and I keep my shoulders still. And that in itself, when you did that to me, for me already there was a huge light bulb. There was a
Mhm.
huge, I remember that, oh, that's a huge light bulb. It's about trying to move, to make a distinction between what you move when. And that's when you said, okay, Sean, we get later to that. Let's do first the 10 body parts. So I was number 3 was the arms, and number 4 would be then
The hands,
the hands.
our hands, and they you can only move them by the wrist
Yep,
here. Yes, and they are, of course, the hands are connected with the underarm, and the hands are also the fingers are connected to the hands.
of course,
So still, our fifth body part would be
the
our
fingers. Now, of course, we have
yeah,
10 fingers, but for simplicity point of view, we call that the fifth body part.
yeah, only
So
fingers.
only the fingers, and it's a nice exercise to keep your hands and your arms still and move only the fingers. Move one fingers, move them not in the same way. Later on, we have words for that because that as well, and then come to another body part, sixth body part. That is also the last body part in the upper body, right? It is your chest, right?
Or rib
or the
cage.
or the rib cage. Yeah,
Mhm.
that would be nice. Now a lot of dancers I noticed that they already use that. Some people use that, call that the fifth limb in dancing. But yeah, what
Mhm.
can you do with your rib cage? Of course, again, everything is connected, but you can, rotate it. You can go forward and backward with it. You can, in a horizontal way, up and down a little bit. I noticed, don't know if you had the same thing, but that's not always immediately accessible for people to move their rib cage in a certain way. Because we typically, if you're not an athlete or a sporter or a dancer, you move it just for breathing, going in and out.
Mhm.
So there is movement in there, but to move it where you can rotate it and circle it, we see in some dance form they can take that pretty far extreme.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. We will tell later what you can do with all these 10 body
Yes.
parts.
Yeah.
And we go to the next one. That would be our hips. Yes. And our hips, you have also a different name in the English language for
Yeah,
it,
you could
Sean?
say hips, but hips typically people talk about a certain area of the pelvis area, right? The pelvis bone.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the area we mean. And of course, there's more than one bone in that area, but that's the pelvis area. Typically, we know how to tilt them. And then
Yeah.
in a lot of dance form, that the pelvis bone is used a lot, right? That's number
Yeah.
7. And then we are already at number 8, Tom, which is or
Our
are
legs.
our legs.
Legs. The whole leg, not only the upper leg
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the down leg, but the whole leg as a whole. And not we call it also not the knee because knee is a joint, and like the hip joint also, and you have also your ankle joint. So the leg, that's the whole, yeah, the whole picture of the leg,
yeah, the leg.
and
Uh,
from up till down or from down till up, doesn't matter, or from left to right.
it doesn't matter for us.
Yeah.
And then you're already at almost the last body part that and then we go a little bit more into detail. That's, of course, your feet, same as with your hands, right? You can move your feet, but you need your ankle joint to move your feet, right?
Yes.
And so your wrist and your ankle joint are, let's say, the same. And there's a lot of similarities between those two, ankle and wrist joint. And then, of course, as last but not least, I'll just take two, Tom. I do the foot and the feet and the toes. you have 10 toes, but we see it as one body part. In a lot of dance styles, you hardly see them. But in some dance, you had that fantastic video where someone was so skillful just moving these toes in different ways. And it was like fascinating. Yeah.
And the toes you can not see in the shoes in the ballroom and Latin world. That's also some difference, because in the contemporary you can see them. In hip hop, they're covered again in the shoes.
Yeah.
So I put the toes in it, and they're quite important in some art forms also. But also, if you are disabled in the body functions and you cannot use anymore your fingers and your hands and your arms, then you could take the toes as an alternative.
And then from other points of view, we also know that even if you have your toes in a shoe, they are very important for your balance.
Mhm.
Your big
Yes.
toe is very important in your balance and in how you use your feet. But obviously, if it's in a shoe, we sometimes also limit actually the possibility to move them quite a bit because of the shoe. And yeah, to activate them, even if you, that's a whole different point. I'm just thinking about it. It's a little bit how our podcast goes. But even I always stimulate the dancers that I work with, even if you always dance in your shoes, do a lot of exercises on your barefoot.
Mhm. Yeah,
It, yeah, it will help you even if you have shoes on.
yeah,
Yeah,
very important. We call them again.
yeah,
That's the head, the
sh-
shoulders. I could also take the chest. It doesn't matter. Arms, then the hands, then the fingers. I take the chest again with the rib cage, or you could call it the rib cage. Then the hips or the pelvis. Yeah, both are okay to call it like that. The legs, then the feet, then the toes. That would be 10. Why we don't take a stomach or a back? Then it would, if you take the back, then it's going from up till down from the spine. Of course, the back is very important body part, and the stomach also, and also your chin when I speak. It's also important, and something what I have between my legs. Something, yes, it's also a body part. But in use, these 10 body parts, it's the most visual ones. And of course, the stomach is a connection between the pelvis and the rib cage, and also the back. The whole back is again, you need the chest and the pelvis for to connect it. And yes, the same like elbow, that's also important. An elbow, but we call it a leg because you use the leg, and we not only take the joints and call the joints. And 10, this 10, of course, I work mainly in the isolations, but even more because isolations for some people it's also a dirty word. They want the word coordination, sounds more fancy, and I assume that, Sean. But in the
yes,
hip hop, it's a common word to isolate and to work with that one.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, this is why I picked this 10 body parts. And of course, we know there are more body parts, but this one is the most visible when you create dance. And if you want to put the body parts in harmony, this works for me the most fine.
yeah. Of course, I very quickly after you introduced me to the GEM method, I started to teach with it too. And these are the things that I always, when I started these things, that there were always people immediately started to debate, oh, why not 11? Why not 12 body parts? And so I tried to help them say, okay, why don't we listen first? Why the 10 body parts? Accept it first as it is, right? And see why that turns into a method how you can help yourself looking at your own dancing, other dancing, how you can teach instead of debating whether it should be 10 or 11 body parts. Because there you introduced a couple of things in connection with that. Why 10 body parts make may more sense than the other things. And that does not mean that either Ton or I never talk about the other body parts that we could have, our ears, our eyebrows, our nose, and stuff like that. We talk about these things too. But we have to think about, oh, no, we don't have to do, and you don't have to do anything. But Ton used the word isolation. And the first exercise that I do with a group is always be conscious to try to move just one of these body parts at the time. We all know how to move them all together, but to move them first, and a word that we could use for that's how I introduce it, is the word isolation. Let's also please not debate whether that's the correct word. Now, what I mean if I say isolation means a specific body part moved by itself, or two,
Yeah.
right? Move by itself. And so I noticed that it's that there are always people in the group that try to talk more about the word or the number instead of seeing what is actually the deeper meaning behind it, what you can do with it. And for me, actually, the biggest breakthrough came to when you said, if you think about it, there's actually only three actions, which is a word that I already used from another method. There's only three actions you can do with each of those body parts. Maximum three, minimum of two, but maximum of three. And that's where I, in the beginning, was like, my eyes went like, what? And then said, yeah, did you know, Jean, that you can only bending, stretching, or rotating those three? You know, if you can, you literally said it, if you can find more with those 10 body parts, I don't know if you said I give you money, but that would be great. And I tried it. I like, well, okay, I'm sure he's wrong. I'm sure he's wrong. And that's for me, Tom, is where I think my eyes went really open. Wow, 10 body parts? And you can actually define what those body parts can do. Those two numbers together gives already an enormous amount of movement, but now I can define them. I can literally say what action you do instead of move your arm. Ton would then say, move how? I meant bending your arm. Ah, no, but I meant lifting. But how do you lift your arm? You have to do either bending, stretch. So words that we just use loosely in dance without really defining what we meant with them. Suddenly I had a language with just 10 body parts and three action that I could give very precise instruction, would be like something to force, but a suggestion for someone to do. And that for me, I spent weeks on that on alone, not even thinking about all the other things that you introduce. And that's, I hope our listeners also would see that they think, oh, wow, those two crazy people, why 10 body parts? Why don't we embrace it first? See if it doesn't work for you, if I am not right in what I just said, just write us a letter. I don't care. But if you just know that those body parts with your arm, you can literally only stretching, bending,
Yeah.
and then someone can also rotating, right? And
Mhm.
I rotate. Now, of course, people could say, yeah, that's your lower arm. Yeah, I rotate my lower arm. That's correct, right? But hey, that's a pretty defined way of moving it. And
Yes.
what if you lift them? Oh, but I have to rotate somewhere to lift. But you grab your cup of coffee. But that's not a real command. To grab, I have to stretch out my arm. Like, wow, there is not a movement that I cannot define with those combinations. Body part, actions used. And that time I thought, if I would have 20, I would go crazy. If I would have
Yeah.
eight, nine different actions, or some people talk about 14 different actions, I would, this alone, that
And
was,
also the reason was why I picked 10.
yeah,
I don't want to be a physiotherapist or
no, yeah,
in the medicine where you have that all bones. It's
And
about
all
206
muscles. Yeah.
years. 206 bones we have, and half of them are in the wrist and in the foot. And then we have our joints, 250 joints till 350, because we don't know exactly where they're really, how many it really are. And then we have 100 who are most mobility.
Mobile, yeah.
And then we have our muscles. It's about 650 muscles we have. But we
That's
don't
what we
know
think
how
now,
much
yeah.
exactly. But as a dancer, it's important to know them. But as a social dancer, 10 would be enough. 10 body parts.
That would
So
be enough.
why I must know all the muscles, all the bones? I know they are important because your skeleton, the whole body of the human being, is built up by these bones, muscles, and joints and ligaments and etc. etc. That's going too deep, and I wanted more. Keep it more by 10. And these are the tens. You can argue why it's not the back there or the spine, because it's a really important body part. So we didn't pick it. And more that the chest, it's, in my opinion, more visible, and the hip than the spine. Of course, the spine is also visible when you roll it or straighten it, etc., but it has not so much impact as the other. Otherwise, we would have 11. And when I would take my small fingers, 12, and then my middle finger,
Yeah.
13, and
Yeah.
my thumb, 14.
No, I
And
definitely think, yeah, that people, specifically if we go a bit deeper into dance, that they should study the basic mechanics and anatomy of the body further than the 10 body parts. We would stimulate them. I was just,
absolutely.
yeah, I was just saying that, wow, if you only start with the 10 and the three actions that I mentioned, that's a lot to work with already. Why would I already go further if I don't understand the first part? So it's
Hmm.
actually a method that helps me if I really want to know more about the shoulder, like you and I actually learned this last weekend. Then, if I think it's important, no one stops us from studying that, uh, to make that
Yes,
more nuanced. Uh,
yes. The body to isolate, that's quite important,
yes.
to do the exercises, not only in stretching, but also in power training and in mobility. It's so important to release the joints, the muscles, more the tension of it, to can hold your alignment in that body. So that's first of all important, but also very important is the coordination between all this isolation, how you can combine it. And we forgot one important word now. Not I forgot it, I know it, but want to tell it a little bit later. It's the bilateral of the body.
Mm.
Why we came to 10 and why we not take 20. Because the body is built up by two sides equal. Not exactly like in the mathematics, but they are equal, symmetric. And we call that bilateral. And B means two. A lateral, it's Sean, you can explain it, otherwise I'm
Yeah,
telling the whole.
lateral it means from the two sides.
Yeah,
So it is the same on two sides of the body, left and right. If we would
yes,
turn around and look front and back, that's not a similarity in there. But in the left too, you have a left arm, you have a right arm. Most people have, by the way.
yes,
Can
yes.
never
I
talk
hope.
about all. And shoulders and only the head, but even the head has is bilateral. You have a left eye, you have the right eye. So that makes it also there. I thought you so Ton, why is that all important? But if you build it
Mhm.
really up, 10 body parts, three actions, it's bilateral, unilateral. Um, to use the other word, right?
Unilateral, it's
It's,
one,
it's one.
one-sided.
It's for one.
One
Uh,
side of the body could be left, could be right.
yeah, it's unilateral. And so if I only move my left side, That's different than when I move two sides. Now I move in bilateral.
Yeah,
So
if you move.
that was in the beginning. I thought, oh, man, my tongue. But
Mhm.
actually, it is. There's this famous series of books which in the gem to remind me of that, and it's always about a complex thing for dummies, cooking for dummies, mathematics for dummies, computer technologies for dummies. Now, it was not a simple book, it was just a clever title to see everything to a different lens, from a more structured and hopefully a lens that makes sense when you put that in a certain order. And that's what you did. Think, oh yeah, of course, you have a left and a right arm, but they move the same, and the structure is the same, right?
Mhm.
It's just on opposite sides, and so that is that. So it makes totally sense to call it one shoulder as one body part, and not saying left or right shoulder. When we give
Yes.
instructions, we can do it. But my left arm or my right arm, it's not that one can do if everything is with most people. So if I can bend my right arm, I also can bend my left arm. It's not that I can do different actions with one part and not with the other part.
Yes, and this is why we call it 10 body parts. Two arms is one body part, two hands is one body part, 10 fingers is one body part. And yeah, so we came to 10 because I assume that easy is to remember, but believe me, it isn't, because it takes a lot of awareness to move them all 10 at the same moment. And that's almost
In a conscious way.
a big challenge, I would say. Human beings are capable, maybe, to be at the same moment aware when you do a body scan, two or three, maybe maximum four body
Yeah,
parts
with a lot
in the
of
same moment.
practice. But so if we move through normal life, that's how I start to see it. We move actually quite unconscious most of our body parts. It's not that I just take my cup, but I turn my chair a little bit and I'm talking. So that happens very unconscious, which is a good thing when we move through life. But to do the movements, which we're now talking about, dance or other sports as well, you want to make your movements first in a conscious way. And to do more than four body parts consciously move in a different way, it's another thing that I would say don't listen only to us, just try to do it. Try to move, take four of those body parts and start with one. Okay, yeah, I move my arm. Okay, I can add my head to it. Okay, I do two. It's pretty good. Tom would say, yeah, but timing wise, they go symmetrical. So I move them
Mhm.
maybe in a different action, but from a momentum point of view, they moved exactly in the same time. Ooh, if I have to also change that, it already becomes a little bit difficult. So I did two.
Mhm.
Now, okay, I can add probably three. Okay, I practice. I can add my chest to it. You probably
Yeah,
would say,
but can you really think at that moment
no,
on all three
no,
at
no,
the same?
no. What I
No.
actually do, Tom, you saw it, right? I
Mm.
mention first one and then let that go a little bit in my subconscious and just let it go. And then I add my head and I just take one that I add, do it conscious. With a lot of practice, I noticed I can do a little bit more at the same time. I can do chest and head at the same time. With a little
Yeah,
bit practice. But it's a cute exercise, seriously. it's
yeah. For that one, Sean, we will come back later in
yeah,
the podcast.
yeah.
We go now to the singular and composed movement.
Yes.
And we made already a podcast about it, but actually, the 10 body parts, that would be really more nicer to do first.
Ah,
But we
yeah.
arrived here now. We are doing the 10 body parts. So we have singular and composed. First, I tell you a little story how I came to singular and composed.
Please do.
In the art form, like in the architect world, or in the painting world, or in the photography world, or in the design world. When I take it in the, say, I build a house, I have a singular material like glass or iron or stone. If I would combine them, so I have singular materials, if I would combine them, then I have a composed elements in it. And these composed elements you have also in the painting world with colors
Yeah.
and with lines, a single line and composed lines. And the composed lines give a composition. But coming back to singular and composed, so one body part would be two arms. One body part, singular, would be two shoulders or two legs. If I move them in the same direction and in the same timing, then they are completely symmetric. If I use only one leg instead of two legs, then it's automatically asymmetric and it's singular. It's a singular movement in an asymmetric way, in an asymmetric form, in an asymmetric timing, in direction, etc. And
Yeah.
that's quite interesting.
No, that is super interesting, and I see it literally every day, Tom. Hopefully, you're proud of me. But every day I
Mhm.
think about this. Then I thought, oh, there are only three body parts that we actually tend not to talk about symmetric or asymmetric if we move them just by themselves. Because think about the bilateral, unilateral, we just move our head. We typically don't say that's symmetric or asymmetric. If I just, or the chest, or the pelvis. So the body parts from which are actually only unilateral, we do that. In a different setting, we can talk about composed and even symmetric if it comes dynamically. But we talked about that. Oh, so that is true for the arms. Oh, I moved them singular, moved them symmetric, but I moved two arms, right? I moved two arms, but it is one body part. So that's that thing. But now I move them, you know, still singular, but they go in opposite directions. So that
Yes.
is a form of asymmetrical. But in a
Yeah.
direction point of view, it's actually the same direction. It's just when one goes on. So you can actually make it super complicated for yourself. And I keep thinking about it like that. I keep thinking and seeing more and more just by playing with these words. I'm not trying to come up with a new word. I'm just every movement that I make, I try to fit in the words that you gave us. And this is, I want to give that to the listeners, is not debating where Ton was right or not. Could we use a different word for composed? Maybe. In the end, I'm honored to help Ton with finding the words, but in the end, for us it was more defined, saying, "Hey, we have one word, and when we use it, this is what we mean with it." But what I would like the listeners to hear, Ton, is that you gave me a language to look at my movements. And when I have a language, I can communicate. And when I have a language that is clear and not ambiguous, so where there is two meanings, like if I say it's warm inside, that is ambiguous because warm is a personal feeling. But if I say it's 40 degrees, it's already more precise. People can then decide for themselves whether they feel that warm or not. So you gave that word, you gave those words. You said, I move my arm. If I move my arm, I don't move my legs. But so that for me, Ton, was with the word singular. Okay, that's one movement, singular. Okay, clear. And then you already snuck in another word, symmetric and asymmetric, without
Yes.
explaining it. So you have to explain a little bit those two words, which we also made a podcast about, by the way,
Yes.
symmetric and
Yes. Yes.
asymmetric. But can you explain a little bit when you and I used the word symmetric and asymmetric?
Yes. First, in form, like my hands. When I keep my hands flat
Yeah,
to each other, frontal,
yeah,
then they are in form now symmetrically. Would I bend my fingers here on the other side, already my hand, because I use only my fingers now, it gets asymmetrically in form and in space. But would I just do my arm in a different direction, then still the form is symmetrically, but the space where we are in, it's asymmetrically. And it's how you said it already, it gets more and more actually complicated because it goes endless in macro and in micro level. And but stay more at the surface now. And even if I would have the form symmetrically for my arms and my hands and my fingers, even when I would move them, and the other one it's still active, my left hand active on place in not in time because time is a constant what goes, but I keep them active on the spot. I cannot keep them still because they will always moving. And the other one I go quite fast up and down, or yeah, up and down, then it's asymmetrically already also in dynamic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's quite interesting. So you can combine form and dynamic in symmetrical way or in asymmetrical way. But maybe if you are not so familiar with it, it could make now in your head.
Well, I
And
could,
then you need,
yeah,
hmm?
I could make it a little bit clearer.
Yes,
That the body parts is actually what do we move? We move an arm.
yes,
You could say what do you move,
correction.
right? So then you
Yes,
come to the point is what action do you make with that body part? So make for yourself these columns, right? What do I move? What action do I make? By now, you could debate with us, but stay with us, try it out. You can only do three actions with each of those body parts. And then so those are three was bending, stretching, and rotating. And then Ton already start to make a big chapter is how. And how you could start using words as do I move them in a symmetrical or asymmetrical way? Do I move them now with what we call a that's another column under how is it dynamic? We do a whole podcast over that, so don't get in panic yet. But things like how we use time, how much muscle tension we use, those are more in the dynamic quality. So, but in simple ways, you could say, hey, what do I move? What action do I make? And how do I make those actions? Which makes it already clear. And if you really listen to yourself, and maybe you listener, you're way further than us and you already have a language, that's great. Stick to it, I would say. But for a lot of people, I can literally guarantee after all these years of teaching that it is very useful to have very clear language about these things. How do we move? What action do we make? And what are we moving? And that in itself, dancing is that's the beauty of Ton's method. Actually, Ton started to see how complex dancing and movement is. But what his drive is, how can I make something so complex with all these variables into a method so that we can actually start from a foundation? It's not to force our method in you. It's actually how can you just stay and said, I think you need to move more. I think you need to get the energy out of the floor. So what are we actually saying then? And me probably Tom too, in our begin periods of teaching, we talk like that. I came across a method by Mr. Rudolf Laban, which helped me a lot still to today to give a stronger language. This is another shell on top of that I am very enthusiastic about. And but that's what it is. Movement in itself is so complex. But how can we talk about it that we just don't that we go away from I think it's beautiful. But what are we actually saying? Huh? Or it's ugly. And now that's what you and I, Tom, even where before we met each other, heard a lot in audience where people just say these things. I think they need to move faster. What
Yes.
are we actually saying, right?
Yes.
That's all non-information. And then Ton started to blow my mind. In the beginning, I thought, oh, Ton, that's way too complicated. I'm not going to do it. But then I thought, what am I resisting? I'm resisting the clarity that I could get. And that's what I did. And if I just look with Ton now at a competition, we sometimes say, let's just only look at body parts. Let's just look only at, and we take one element and could spend an hour. Sometimes we get bored, but we could spend an hour just talking about, hey, how are they in the symmetrical and asymmetrical way? And it's fascinating. Fascinating. It's,
I try to use concrete words,
yes.
Sean, and not blurry words, because
Objective
all these
words.
words, what you said, they are so vague, so blurry. I can nothing do with it because they are not
Yeah.
concrete enough. The
Well,
energy comes from the floor. Phew, that's already. You have to move faster. What? How?
yeah. Or
Even
be more connected.
yeah,
And I think, well,
even
if you say connection, you need to at least have two things. Otherwise, you
yeah,
cannot connect. Uh,
yeah, connect. Yeah, needs at least two. But come back even more worse. People also sometimes so very negative. You didn't close the feet. Say, can you close the feet? That's more concrete.
yeah.
Instead of you don't close the feet. You are not fast enough. You didn't jump high enough. Say, I want that you jump higher, maybe 10 centimeters. Can you try that? So then you have some imaginary, 10, that's a lot, still 10. What? Jump higher. No, you didn't jump higher. How? Sean, explain me how people can teach like that. Um,
Now, how did we?
Incredible.
Yeah, how did we were? You and I were raised up in the same discipline with the same crazy words, and you and I had years and years the same experience, always asking these questions. So they thought we were nasty students. You just do
Mhm.
what I say. Oh, that's when I almost want to go away. That because that does not fit in my vocabulary. Just do
Yes,
what you say. Weird thing. So that made
yeah.
Ton, and it's not to be disrespectful to all these great teachers that I had, because I had many great, also in very, but for me, a lot of things were unclear, Tom. And in the beginning, that's what. So I was definitely with my other teacher. He started to teach me a language that we can use among each other and talk about the same thing. In it, and you made that, even you took it a step further, and that's what I would like people to explore first. To those 10 body parts, look at it. Do we have more? Obviously. That's not even a debate. But just 10, and look at these 3 actions that we gave: bending, stretching, rotating. We could do a whole podcast only on that topic by itself, because
Yes.
I cannot jump without those 3 actions. I cannot walk without these 3 actions. I cannot talk without these. Maybe if you're which is a fancy word for buikspreker. And but other than that, there's nothing from a movement point of view that I cannot do without those 3 actions and using at least one body part.
Hmm.
There's it's impossible. And that's when I think you got me, because I think now I have some sort of almost like I literally have a system, and I don't have to use do more or do less. I can literally say what that for me is important.
Yes. Say you would have verbs like working words, like sitting, standing, sleeping. How you want to do this without bending, stretching, rotating? That's impossible. And also important is after I had discovered the 10 body parts, I discover also the proprioception. And means your own property. Proprio, your property, your body parts. And deception, the perception from that body parts, how they work in space and time. Mostly you find only the definition in space, but you cannot go through space to use a particular duration or time or tempo, whatever you want to call it. So this is why I said the perception of your body parts in space-time. And
Yeah.
that makes sense for me. And when I go deeper in it, we had made a podcast already from it. But space would be three-dimensional. Quickly, we go through it. Then the time would be four-dimensional, but the perception of it would be the fifth dimension. Think about it. And you can, with your perception, with your awareness, that 5D, you can color the other 4Ds, 3Ds, with that 10 body parts, because that is your instrument. That are the 10 body parts what moves through space and time. And this is so incredible if you can move it in a singular way or in a composed way. But how I practice this, that's really interesting. I did years, but for years I did always a body scan. It's a sort of meditation. So when I go eating, I thought first in the beginning what I'm doing on which body part I use the most in bending, stretching, rotating. When I go to the shower, how I bend, stretch, and rotate, which body parts I use for the shower. And every day I try to practice this. I teach myself and to be aware what I use in bending, stretching, rotating in that 10 body parts. And that helps a lot, Sean, to be aware in your training how these 10 body parts can coordinate with each other. But first, I try to discover in the isolation which ones are really I using there, and then suddenly I understood there are singular movements and composed movements, and mostly we move composed. But if you be an artist, you can sometimes choose to do only one body part and not to do the most body part what I could do in one moment. That's also nice and impressive. But to do only just one body part. And if I would make, how we say, my body language, and I would just I have my finger here, my arm up, and I would point to Sean only to bend it, then they get a totally different meaning for somebody
Yeah.
in the language. If I would also do a facial expression and you have more context to it. But that one bending makes the totally difference in the body language also.
Yeah. Which of course is, and maybe that's the next podcast, that is the meaning. And the meaning is something that we personally put to the movement itself, does not per se has a meaning. So Ton was pointing at me. Maybe he was pointing, we don't know that. So if I do the other thing that I always do, Ton, I stop one finger. A lot of people will immediately be now, wow, you make that sign. That's just, this is also for children, this podcast. You cannot make that sign. That's only because you have a certain meaning equated to this movement that I made. But I can
Uh,
guarantee you, in a lot of other cultures, it has no meaning at all, or sometimes completely the opposite meaning. Specifically with this sign, it's just one thing, but it is means in diving, it means we go up. In politics, it means now that's a good thing. Some people put it now to the one who won the candidate, won the presidency in the United States, because he made this all the time like this. So they say it's a sign. But in some countries, this is actually the same meaning as this. And how
hmm.
weird is that? So, meaning, yeah, we talk about that. It's a different chapter. We're now talking just pure about what movement you make consciously. And I found something new in that, Tom, just recently when we talked about it, because you said it's some sort of a meditative state. Huh? So the word ception is the second half word of proprioception, and that means actually the act of sensing. Sensing is an activity you do. It's an activity. If we only do that, Ton has his watch always twice a day. His watch goes beep, and then he becomes active and sensing what he's doing. But in the beginning, I said, Ton, let's do that 10 minutes. If you just do 1 minute per day where you more actively sensing how you grab your cup, how you brush your teeth, how you put on your pants, the most normal things in life, if you sense more what movements you do to do these things, we can guarantee you, and I say now we because we have done this now for a long time, the things that you do will change a lot. You smell different, you taste different. The act of sensing, do you really listen? The act of sensing is such. My other teacher used the same thing a little bit more. When you touch, he used to say, but do you really feel what you touch? But no, in dancing is often grab the hand, go in hand position. But do you really feel the act of sensing, the act of how you stand? And that is the true meaning of proprioception. It constantly do
Yes,
that. I like it when you start to say that it's almost meditative, to really
yes,
conscious that state of being there, right?
yes. Also, Sean, sometimes the 10 body parts, we use them mainly functional. Grab a cup,
Yes, yes,
t- take a pen, or
yeah,
yes, I have a pen here. But in dancing, that's a different story because when I take the pen, then I've what you said. I feel that pen, I reach that pen, but you never know how I will take the pen because this is the art that you never know how you take that pen. And these are the secrets of each movement in each moment to make it not only functional, that's what I mostly see in dancing, but make it art from it, how you pick it. First, what body part, and then how you take it. And that's interesting. And you never know if you will grab the pen.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, that's. But when I tell this to people, okay, we go through the routine. Oh, this one is functional. Huh? Functional? No, that's like that. And then I work with it, how they touch the floor or how they touch the other person. And suddenly, wow, that looks like magic. Yes, what it is. Because if you dance only a program from the 10 body parts in a routine, then every moment you lost the magic, in my opinion. And at the end, it's about how you decide which body part on which moment in uh, in which direction you use that.
yeah,
That's the real art of that person. That options what he has, because now we gave options with particular terminology. If you use them, you get a language. Before you didn't have words for it. And we looked for words for it.
yeah,
And now Sean and I, we have the same terminology. And if we work with our group, we try to open these words that they can discover them and slowly developing them. And hopefully they will learn at the end and they will stick with them. And then we have also the same terminology and we understand immediately in 2 seconds because we can break the patterns and can recognize them. And before I couldn't also by myself not, but I analyzed so many times in my daily life and ask always the question, why?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think to have the same words but have the same meaning for the words are two different things, right? We have the same word for the thing
exact,
that
Sean.
we are sitting on, which is a
Yeah.
chair. But so often a lot of wars have fought over this that we think we talk about the same and we don't. So if we see ourselves as teachers in this case or students, it would help us. I think everyone would agree that we are agreeing on the same language. So if the next time if I say a chair, ask me what chair are you talking about, John? Is it a chair for your desk, or is it a chair to lay down, or is it a bar stool? So now now I'm clear. We can talk about a dog for hours, but if you have a little poodle in your mind and I have a Doberman Pinscher in my mind, we can talk about the same about a dog for hours, and that's what Tom did, is make a distinction as much as possible, or the work is definitely not done, right?
Hmm.
Is can we say it? So yeah, if you have a slightly different meaning of that word, but if you're in our method and we talk about singular, now you know. If we talk about
Yes. Oh,
proprioception, now it's
yes.
very clear. And we worked with last weekend, the weekend before, with our students, and you can see how quickly they can come to almost an agreement when they talk about things. You know,
Yeah.
it
So
was a
when we,
beauty to
yeah,
see. Yeah,
yes,
I'm doing a
when we
sneak
speak,
introduction of our seminars.
yes, yes. Thank you, Sean. In the summer we have one, but when we speak about the arm, then we know what the arm meant. It's the whole. When we speak about fingers, then it's one body part, fingers. That's where you
Yeah,
make a composition from.
yeah.
So and how you configure it all together,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that makes,
that's a whole different thing. But if I now ask the students, say, hey, what action did you make? They typically don't say anymore. I jump, I fall. They don't. They literally say one of those the actions. Then sometimes they ask me, "What body part are you talking about, Cha?" I said, "Oh, sorry, I
yeah,
forgot
yeah,
to ask. I forgot to ask you what body part." Say so. We get a language, and that's so valuable. We're almost at the end, Ton, of
yeah,
an hour talking
almost, yes,
about the body
10
parts.
body
Is there
parts,
anything
yes.
you want to leave our audience?
Because I not speak about a human, I speak about a child of 8 years old, a girl, more specific, a girl of 8 years old. And that gets more specific. Instead, yeah, this human, that would be also vision now. So when I speak about the head, it can rotate horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. So I would say the head moves now vertical. And I would assume that I would say yes. But if I do it horizontal, then if you give a meaning on it, it's just turning, but you could assume it would be a no. And so if you get specific in it, then you can create more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you
And you
can
be
create
aware.
more. You can also analyze different,
Yes.
which is, and if you can analyze it, you can actually do more with it. That's
Yeah.
we come back to that another time, what the role is of analyzing movements and how that could help you to create other things. So that's another nice, I think, nice topic, Tom. But you also, besides having words, I also so often call it tools to analyze movement. And that
Yes.
actually, what I discovered, Ton, you said that in the Dutch episode, so nice, had nothing to do with dancing. You could do it in football, you can do it in daily life. You can analyze any movement, not just in dancing. And that's of course, I think, but that's subjective. I think it's a great tool to have. And whether I always have to use the tools, that is your decision. That's not our decision. We just can give you the tools. What you do with it is up to you. That's basically how I see it.
Yes. So, Sean, we come to a conclusion. We
Yeah.
spoke about the 10 body parts: head, shoulders, arms, chest, hands, fingers, hips, or pelvis, you can call it. Then we get our legs, our feet, our toes. That's 10. We can bend them, stretch and rotate them in a horizontal way, vertical way, diagonal way. 360 degrees we can move in space and we can move in time, space-time, and our conscious, our 5D makes the other 4D. And then we can move it singular, compose, symmetric, asymmetric. That was in a fast way to tell
Summary.
everything.
That's a
A
summary
summary.
of what we did. Concentrate, I would say, on the 10 body parts after listening to this of this episode. Try it yourself, right? Try to move just by them individual, and then maybe you can make a combination of them. Ton used the word compose for that. We have a whole podcast about that, and build it up from there. See how far you can come with your conscious mind or the act of sensing. And with that, I would already say bye bye. And I will tell you, of course, where you can find us, of course. But I always give the last word to Ton, Greten. Give us some wisdom at the end.
Yes, try to discover what you can do with that body when you eat, when you are in the shower, or step in a car or on your bike. Try to analyze what your body is doing. Try to come closer to your body. That would be my advice. And then try to discover what you are doing.
Love it. Love it. Love it. With that, we say goodbye to you all. Thank you for listening to another episode of Dance Gems, of course. And this time we talked about the 10 body parts. It's always Ton and Jean talking about it. But once in a while we have a guest and we talk about other things. So maybe that's the next time. So stay tuned for our next episodes of Dance Gems. And I'm also going to tell you where you can find us while I start the music. You can find us on Spotify at Dance Gems, Apple, same address, Dance Gems, YouTube at Ton Greten /podcast, on our website www.gem.dance/podcast, and then we have a Facebook group, facebook.com/groups and the Dance Gems. And something new that I want to add and already introduce for the people who are really interested, we have a special WhatsApp group that you can only get if you ask us for it. But it's worthwhile being part of that as well, where we give you more in-depth information about Dance Gems. Sorry, I was stumbling here, Ton. But with that, I say bye-bye to you all.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Until next time.
Till next time.